Thanks for listening to Baxie's Musical Podcast. If you like what you hear today, be sure to like it, follow it, tell everyone you know about it. You can also give it a big fat review. Also, be sure to follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook for regular updates about upcoming guests. Today, we're brought to you by Metro Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram at Chicopee. Be sure to check out their state-of-the-art dealership next to BJ's and Big Y on Memorial Drive, or head over to metrojeep.com and make it Metro. And then drive home in your new Metro Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram today.
It's Baxie's Musical Podcast.
On February 2nd, 1986, I saw a band play at a club in downtown Milwaukee. I was told by friends, you are going to love these guys. The name of the band was The Frogs, and to say it was something unforgettable is like saying that water is wet or that fire has the potential to burn stuff. This wasn't just a sneaky hideaway show with a bunch of local guys banging out cover songs, although, in fairness, they did do an amazing version of Lionel Richie's classic Say You, Say Me, but that's not really the point. What made this night special were the fact that the Frogs put on one of the funniest shows that I had ever seen. At the same time, I could not help but ask myself, why am I laughing at this? I'll tell you exactly why. Because the humor was dark and twisted and campy, and yet they were freaking great. Needless to say, I couldn't wait for the Frogs to release a record, any record. Of course, that would take another 2 years to happen, and when it did, they only released about 1,000 copies, of which I did not get one, at least not for many years. Now, I can tell you that their self-titled debut was a really solid record of quirky pop songs in the veins of T-Rex, Alex Chilton, even the Kinks, songs that were virtually ignored by the record-buying public. Now, here's where the story about the Frogs gets really interesting, because the story of Jimmy and Dennis Flemion of the Frogs is more than just about a couple of brothers who were writing songs together. The Frog story is also about unintended consequences. During these years, Jimmy and Dennis got their hands on a 4-track tape recorder and began improvising songs off the top of their heads. Loads of songs, thousands in fact, sometimes recording up to 20 songs in a single day. Songs that were never meant to be released. This is just a way of blowing off steam and making each other laugh hysterically. These recordings were eventually shared amongst friends and eventually became somewhat of a Milwaukee underground treasure. These were songs that were about all kinds of potentially uncomfortable subjects, from drug use, race, religion, and sex, particularly gay sex. Now, it should be pointed out that these songs were never recorded in a mean-spirited way, but the absurdity and the humor of it all made these recordings unique and perhaps even more compelling than their ability to write pop songs alone. Eventually, these recordings got into the hands of the late producer Steve Albini, who then presented them to Homestead Records, a trendy record label out of New York that would release music from Dinosaur Jr., Nick Cave, Sonic Youth, Screaming Trees, and many others. Interestingly enough, the record company wasn't interested in putting out their early pop material. They wanted to release the other stuff. And so they did with 1989's It's Only Right and Natural, an album that blissfully celebrates homosexuality in a way that had never been done before, with a message of homosexual supremacy. Again, it's 1989, long before gay rights were openly embraced or even talked about. The fact that neither Jimmy nor Dennis Flemion were gay didn't really seem to matter. And while some critics may have accused them of being in bad taste, it was these improvisational lo-fi home recordings that seemed to capture as much attention, if not more so. This includes a condemnation from TV evangelist Pat Robertson as being proof the devil had infiltrated rock and roll music. Now, that's not the greatest reason to buy a record that I don't know what the hell is. The album became an underground sensation, sparking praise from the likes of Billy Corgan from the Smashing Pumpkins, who would later go on to produce and perform with them on stage. Same with Eddie Vedder of Pearl Jam, Evan Dando from the Lemonheads, Beck, and many others, including Sebastian Bach from Skid Row. Even Nirvana's Kurt Cobain would become a huge fan of the Frogs, not only including the album on his list of the top 50 albums of all time, but playing the album before every Nirvana concert appearance. 7 years after that release of It's Only Right and Natural, the Frogs released their follow-up, My Daughter the Broad, another compilation of early recordings. Again, it became a classic, this time focusing on a wider range of sexually potent topics that were both equally offensive and hilarious at the same time. As I said, their live shows were also unforgettable, with members often performing in wigs, makeup, and in Jimmy Flemion's case, a pair of 6-foot bat wings that were worn at nearly every show, including their 1994 appearance at Lollapalooza's second stage. But don't kid yourself, the Frogs were hardly a novelty act. These were skilled musicians who wrote great pop songs and were on par with anybody else that was available at the time. They just happened to have another side to them that was incredibly funny and interesting. Did the Frogs ever show commercial potential? That totally depends on your definition. For some, it's hard to imagine why they weren't bigger. For others, it's not hard to see why they weren't. However, those that appreciate the Frogs absolutely love the Frogs. Unfortunately, the Frogs were often disrupted with bad luck, aborted albums, and personal tragedy, including the untimely death of Dennis Flemion, who passed away from an accidental drowning in 2012. However, Jimmy Flemion and the Frogs' legacy continue to endure. In fact, the Frogs are about to reissue My Daughter the Broad. This was another compilation of improvised home recordings from the 1980s that also became an underground sensation, where it has been described as one of the funniest albums of the decade. The updated version has been expanded to a double album with 8 new songs and is set to be released on September 11th. Simultaneously, a full-length documentary about the Frogs has been in the works for nearly a decade. To talk about that and a whole lot of other stuff is my guest today, Jimmy Flemion from the Frogs on Baxie's Musical Podcast. Yeah, I was telling you that I spent a number of years living in Milwaukee, going to school there, working for a couple radio stations, and I had seen the Frogs back in 1986 at the old Papagayo nightclub, which is no longer there. But I remember seeing the Frogs and enjoying it so much that it was like it's a real thrill to be talking to you 40 years later after the fact, and this is all before you guys actually started to release music. This is when you were just playing around town and having a great time.
Yeah, that is true.
When I think of that show that night, I remember walking out of there thinking it was like maybe like one of the funniest shows that I had ever seen.
Was that the downstairs show or was that upstairs? We opened for Ministry upstairs and then we played downstairs once. So.
I'm trying to remember. I think it was like a show in February. It may have been with Ministry. If I'm again, it's 40 years ago. So, but I remember laughing intensely at what you guys were doing on stage and the songs that you were singing and the fact you did like a Lionel Richie cover that night. It was great. And then I found myself asking myself, should I be laughing at this? And after spending the week, kind of regurgitating the whole Frogs catalog, I realized, it is just as enjoyable today as it was back then. And so to see you guys, reissuing albums that have been long out of print is really cool to see.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, as you know, we've been going at it since 1980, and even before then, it was 1976. We were brothers, so we were doing music, but we became the Frogs in 1980. And as you know, the first album didn't come out till 1988. So when you saw us, it was probably 86, right?
About 86 or so. So this is like a couple years before the first album came out.
That would have been downstairs.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen like Ministry a number of times too, so it's hard to remember. It all kind of goes together. But you're about to reissue the 30th anniversary edition of My Daughter the Broad, the third record from the Frogs. It's been out of print for a good long period of time. Tell me about the decision of re-releasing it and turning it into a double album and adding extra stuff to it.
Well, I guess it's 52 minutes, I believe. So I believe for sound quality, it makes sense, or it wouldn't be as crackly, or however that works when you make it. You put too much sound on one side, so we decided to add some extra tracks. We added 8 additional tracks, so then it comes out to 30 tracks, right? 30 tracks, 30th anniversary. That was an album, as you know. Gerard Coslaw, he eventually left Matador, where we put out It's Only Right Natural on Homestead, and then years later we spoke with him and he wanted to put that out. And so that's a collection of songs that, that are made up over a long period of time. So between Right Natural and 1996, that's about the time that's when all the made up were made up, between that time. So, I mean, there was plenty to choose from by 1996. And in a way, we tried in our way to think, okay, let's put out whatever would be kind of like the greatest hits, or the most, I would say, commercial out of those. Because as you know, if you don't know, I'm telling you, if you make up a song, you have to put it in some kind of semblance and in your mind, and you gotta, maybe repeat the same patterns because you're just making up on the spot. You're not writing it down and say, oh, have plenty of time to think about it. So once you do it on the spot, some of the songs, when it's, they hit harder, they hit perfect, or they made sense, and they were, the subject matter or the crazy thoughts that came out on some of them that might have appealed to us more than others. And some, there was 22 songs, and I think out of those, maybe there was two or so that Gerard had or maybe had maybe five. He wanted to choose certain ones. Other than that, we together.
How did you decide? I mean, when you went back and looked at what else you may have had, because I know you've been releasing stuff all along. When you go back all that time, how did you settle on these 8 new songs? Was that a hard process, or did you know, I think we can go back to that one or this one?
In a way, I mean, once again, some are more hookier than others, and some I don't know, for sentimental value. There's Dennis sings, with the old man voice, or I'm sad the goat was with the Candy Apples Red. I don't know if you're familiar with that one.
Yep.
It has that kind of tone, and then there's the other one. The other character is kind of like the Evil Jack character with problem solution to your problems dance. Once Smack Goes the Dragon, that was released before on that box set, but it's I mean, if you crank that song, it's a mind blower. It's one of our cooler songs that way. That in terms of made up, but it was made up in a way, but then there's a lot of production involved with that one. So.
One of the things that I had completely forgotten about was the fact that Jay Tiller was an early member of the Frogs, and I was a big fan of Couch Flambeau. When he had that band together. Tell me about that, because I know he eventually plays kind of an important role in the Frog story. Tell me a little bit about Jay's involvement with you guys.
Sure. He worked at Record Head, as you maybe know. That was people who don't know, that was a record store / head shop. And I guess he'd seen us at the Starship, which I don't know if you're familiar with the Starship because you grew up there, or for maybe around that time, the punk club downtown Milwaukee, and we to my knowledge, I guess he caught us a few times there, and then he was we would eventually shop at Record Head, and and go in there, and then that's how we met him, I believe, that way. And he would say, there's other people who do impressions of him. I'm not going to do impression. Maybe you should ask me to play, bass with you guys or whatever. So, as you know, it was just the two of us. It was guitar. It started out, electric guitar and drums. And then eventually when the Death songs came around, 82, it was acoustic and, in the beginning, acoustic and drums. And then around that time, that's when we had the Wings, and it would have been maybe the second or third show during the Death songs era when we got him aboard, and he that way, and as you know, he did do some artwork for Here Comes Santa's something, and
right.
And Now You Know You're Black, the singles. So and it was it's fun on the road, as you know, when you take people on the road and you spend time,
It's funny as I'm reading about it and recalling, that's right, he did play with them. I'm like, has there ever been a guy that probably fit in better with the kind of music that you guys were doing than a Jay Tiller? I mean, he was like the quirkiest guy in a scene that was filled with really quirky people in Milwaukee. Milwaukee was always a very quirky music town, always.
Yeah. Also, as you know, I don't know if you from the recordings or if you ever, I guess you would have seen us with him play. He would have been playing that show you saw. I don't know how many times you've seen it, because so I think there's maybe 8 bass players throughout the years or whatever the number is. His not signature, but with his Rickenbacker bass. Of course, he loved Cheap Trick, but he had his whatever pedal effect he had, and it was kind of monstrous when he would kick in, when we all kicked in with the drums and the dump boxes, and it was quite an amazing sound. So
sure it was.
He that, and then it was along with feedback or whatever. It was, it was a great time.
You hit on it a little bit earlier that the story behind the Frogs is really pretty interesting. I mean, clearly you and Dennis were influenced by a lot of different things. You hear T-Rex, I hear a lot of Alex Chilton. You guys are a fan of XTC. I hear Sparks from time to time with the Frogs, but and it all shows up in the first album in 1988 and throughout your career. But you only released about 1,000 copies of it, and then you somehow start recording songs off the top of your head, improvised songs in a 4-track tape recorder, and these songs are just pouring out of you. I don't know if it's just having fun, trying to make each other laugh, or what it was. Obviously, I don't think you had any intention of these songs seeing the light of day and getting into the hands of people. This was just something the two of you were doing on your own. Tell me a little bit about that and what those recordings were there for. Was it just for shits and giggles, or was it for something bigger?
Well, as you know, we were recording. Maybe you don't know. I'm explaining. The first album, the Frogs' eponymous debut. We recorded it from February '86 to it finally came out in October 1988. But while we were, we put 500 hours into that album, it's a lot over that time. And when we would rent a reel to reel because we didn't have one, and we rented one, and we would record our bits for the studio, all the rehearse for it, and get the bits down, the guitar and the bass and all that, and record the demos at home before we went in, so we'd have it perfected when we went in there. And then in the meantime, we were even rented a cello at the same time, and so we were, we had that fee every weekend. We would rent it, and once again, if we would actually bought it outright, but once again, you pay so much every weekend. And then we started making up those songs on while we were doing the rehearsal for the first album there. We just started making up for whatever reason. And I believe somewhere around that time would have been Reelin' and Rockin' 1 and 2. Those are right at the beginning of the 1986. So that's when those were like the first two made up songs. Or obviously there's a little. Yeah, we made them up, and there wasn't like, it just came to us, but who knows why? And it's like, let's just make up a song. And once we did it, like the first, now that I think of it, it's January 19th or something, like January 19th, 1986. That's when we did the 1-6, which is Lifeguard of Love. Is that the first song on there? And then it goes to Jasmine, something like that. But there was it's like 30 songs that that's all in one day. That's when we did the Godas on that, right? So
yeah.
So all those, we moved into a place, and whenever that was 84, but then they had a baby grand there at the house that they left behind, and then we have pictures of that, us behind the piano, and either Dennis or I would get on that, and there's maybe 1 or 2 songs where I played drums when he was on the piano. But there was the piano, that, and then there was the guitar. We just, and it was like a trade-off. He would play a song, and then he's Lifeguard of Love. I just started playing, and and they come in with the drums and make something up, and it just starts improvising, and that's what you get. And then there's no that first one, there's no overdubs on that stuff. So something like Been a Month Since I Had a Man, that's on there, but we re-recorded it for more perfected, more professional with the cello and all the other stuff on there.
When you're recording these things, obviously you're recording them with no real intention of releasing it. Did you guys have a plan about what you were going to go towards after the first record? I mean, was there any discussion about, okay, what's the next album going to be? Or because obviously things wound up taking a pretty unexpected turn here.
Yeah, we just never got there because once we, as you know, we started, or maybe I don't know. We started recording that February 1986, so then September of 87, before we even finished the album in October of 1988, then Gerard calls us on the phone. Gerard Koslow from Homestead Records at the time, and it was I know good with dates. It was September 29th, 1987, and I pick up the phone and it says, is Dennis there or whatever? I said, who is this? Or whatever. It's Gerard Koslow from Homestead Records, and I said, Dennis, there's some, on the phone, give him the phone, and then he's like, yeah, and he says, I really like your stuff, or I like it, I like the cassette I got, and I want to put this stuff out, and we're thinking, somehow he got I don't know how, but he got a tape of the first album, the one that came out, and he's talking about the made up stuff, which would include, I've got drugs, it's a little everything, and so then, well, that's where you asked about Jay Tiller before, and I don't know if you know the story, that Jay Tiller said he was always bugging Dennis for a copy of this, a copy of the made up songs. I gotta have it. It's so great, whatever. He was really into it, and and Dennis was reluctant because it's like it's like our private world or whatever. We're just making up at home. It's like, why we're just gonna give it away to everybody, but not in the end, but in actuality and in reality, we knew that we had something. We were like, this is the other stuff, but this is kind of stuff that's really special because it's just crazy. Or we would play it to our friends and they would react, or like Jay, like he said, oh, I want a copy, I want to play it and listen to it, and he would get off on it, whatever. So we gave it to him, and as you know, then he gave it to Steve Albini, who gave it to Gerard, and then Gerard said, I want to put this out. So that's
when you discovered that that's what they wanted to put out rather than the first album all over again, I mean, did you I mean, like you said, you thought you had something, but did you think they're out of their minds, or where were your heads at that point when they have that conversation?
Well, it's just as after not 500 hours at that point in the studio, but we would investing so much time in that stuff, we didn't even, we didn't not entertain the thought of that stuff coming out. But in actuality, that was when it finally did. That was 9 years from 1980 to 1989, and we thought, not like we'd had enough, or like we just thought, finally somebody's gonna, I want to put out your record, I want to sign you or whatever, and at the time we thought, this is going to be which there was talk, this is going to be a 7-album deal. So you're talking about, well, where's this career going to go? You're thinking like, do this 1 album a year or whatever, and it never panned out that way, but that's the story how that went.
When It's Only Right Natural comes out, were you surprised by people's reactions to it? Because it really became this underground type of, it reminds me in the way, like kind of like the old, Buddy Rich bus tapes where, people would pass around and say, you're not going to believe this, take a listen to this. And, it was Buddy Rich having a, ripping people to shreds in the bus. It kind of had that underground feeling to it. Like, you're not going to believe what you're listening to. What was your reaction to that early reaction?
In a way, we didn't really know that anybody even knew about it. Until years later, or there was no reaction. I don't remember the actual reaction at the time. Like, this is so cool or great. What was your reaction? I don't know how to answer that.
My reaction the first time I heard it is, I didn't look at it as a novelty act at all. It seemed better than that, like more sincere than that. But on the other end of the spectrum, it was absolutely hilarious to listen to. When you talk about reactions, 1989, the predominant theme of that record is homosexual superiority, which in 1989 everything is still very socially taboo when it comes to homosexuality and the sexuality of it. People are very still much in the closet in 1989. And interestingly enough, there's a stark difference between what those songs intended to be and how it could have been interpreted, good or bad. And it's interesting that a guy like, Pat Robertson from the 700 Club would think Satan has finally hit ground zero on the Frogs. To me, what a great critique. That's like the best endorsement you could ever possibly get.
Yeah, that was on that, what's it called? Hell's Bells program on there, right?
Right.
Which, once again, I don't know if you were watching it on TV at the time, and, Dennis used to tape, whatever, because, that's the way you did things back then. He saw it. Anyway, it just blew our minds. Like, what they, all the people, like, once again, it's like we know our, this is a small label. It's like you're next to okay, and then the next and George Michael is like, wait, it's like all these people. How did that happen? But I guess it was meant to happen, or it got into somebody's ears, or turned somebody's eyes or head around, whatever it is.
The whole breadth of these improvisational songs that you guys recorded. I mean, obviously, a lot of different themes come up. Homosexuality is one, racism is one, different sexual perversions are another. The interesting thing about it is the songs were never a condemnation. They were just to present it in a humorous way, but not in a way that passes any sort of judgment, in a way it almost, I don't want to say celebrates it, but looks at it from the perspective of the people that may be marginalized. And that I think is the real big difference between, a band that could have been, dismissing it all, and a band that was actually talking about something relevant, which I think kind of puts the Frogs in a totally different realm all by themselves, especially when you're talking about 1989.
Right. And if you classify or go through all of our work, there's never, I hate this or something. That's not in our vocabulary. It's not on any of the songs. If you hate me, love me. I mean, there's the word hate, but I think that's the only time I hate. Hate me, love me. Once again, it's like, I don't know how people we don't use the word homosexuals, because it's just shortened back then. And once again, we love homos. It's like, you can take that however you want. It's like, we don't say the other thing. I mean, this is what, we're not that kind of band. We're not, just bashing. We're real mad, mommy and daddy didn't love us growing up. I mean, we got, put the black leather jacket on, and et cetera. We were never that band.
Right. Well, I mean, there was enough of that with other punk bands where that was their point of view. But I mean, to me, the most punk thing you could be would be the exact opposite of that. Still talk about those things, but in a way that's celebratory and respectful.
Yeah, in a way, and it's also what's in our heart. We're like I said, that's who kind of people we are. So
right.
So many different.
A lot of attention has been drawn to you guys because of the Kurt Cobain connection. The list of his favorite, top 50 favorite albums of all time. Tell me about that and about the interactions you had with him, because he was like a truly big fan of the Frogs.
Yeah, that's another one where you ask, like, what were reactions like? It's like you don't. How could you, unless it's written in print or said in an interview? How would you know that people are, even thinking about you or talking about you or listening to your music if they've never seen you live or if you've never met them before? And so the Kurt Cobain thing. So we because we knew Mudhoney, we met them prior to that, and that was like that was the day that I the day after I wrote Lord Grunge, after the meeting Mudhoney. So that's April of 1993, and we met them, and because we knew Bob Whitaker was the manager of Mudhoney, when Mudhoney came to, well, actually we played with the so it was right after that we played with the Pumpkins at the Oz in Seattle, and then shortly after that, Mudhoney were opening for Nirvana on the tour. So then when Nirvana came to town, they came to Milwaukee and Chicago. We saw them the first night in Chicago, and Bob Goldthwait opened, as was their opening act. And so then we didn't meet him that night, but then, Bob Whitaker, he said, well, don't worry about it. We'll meet him tomorrow night or whatever. And so we went, so it was Milwaukee the next night. It was October 26, 1994. And I forget what Dennis had going on during the afternoon, but I went down in the afternoon. Dennis gave me tradition, but he gave me a bag full of gifts with, the albums and cassettes and a poster and, frog related stuff, which is, definitely hard to get anyway. It's just, and so, I go back there with Bob Whitaker, and we in his dressing room, and I meet Chris Novoselic, and he says, "Oh, thanks, this is great," or whatever. And then we walk out, and it's the auditorium. So we walk down the hallway there, and we're walking out, and I can see from a distance, it's like up the, you know, the hallway, you know, kind of slants up the pavement. What the hell am I talking about? Inside the arena there, the auditorium, and I see Kurt with pushing a baby stroller. You know, it's kind of like I said, "Oh, there's Kurt." I don't think Dennis was with me then, but Bob Whitaker said, "Oh, don't worry about it. We'll meet him later or whatever." So left it at that, and you know, as luck has it, we come back later, and I don't know if, you know, of course, you know, Dennis, you know, as a way to meet people or break the ice, whatever, he said, you know, why don't you bring your acoustic down, and you know, and I left it in the car. I was like, I don't know if I was too you know, self-conscious. I'm gonna walk into the arena, whatever, with my guitar, and I wish I had. And not like you know, not like history would have changed, but I think it would have in a way when, you know, with, hanging out and playing songs with Kurt. So then we came back, and then another show, you know, watch the show. Nirvana. Oh, so then I don't know if you know the story, but then we're sitting out there, and it's standing out there, and it's arena, you know, auditorium, and it's before they go on. I don't know who the opening act was, but before they're going on, you hear, you know, I've Got Drugs. They played the entire album of, you know that story or no? They played the entire.
I've heard that. Yeah, they used to play before almost every show.
Yeah, and there was a show in Atlanta when they played, and we heard from the Pumpkins guitar tech that he said that they were ready to go on stage, and they couldn't find the Frogs tape, so they sent somebody out to the record store to buy it, you know, whatever, to find it, and they wouldn't go on until they, you know, wanted to. So that's pretty cool.
That's a real fan. That's a real fan right there.
Yeah. So anyway, it's just blowing our minds, and I thought that's being played, like, and then so Dennis and his wife had he's I wasn't with them at the time, but they're back, not wherever the area is where you have coffees or drinks on a table or whatever in the back room or whatever. They were back there, and then they're just there, you know, grabbing stuff or whatever it might be at the line or the counter with drinks and food, and they're facing this way, and they hear behind them, yeah, and I heard the Frogs are going to be here tonight. It was for Kurt, you know, he's so really excited about it, and Dennis and Janice and wife and Sam were looking around like, you know, they didn't turn away. I mean, I don't know if they turned around, he was gone or whatever, but you just heard that. So anyway, the show ends, then we go, you know, we're backstage because we know One Honey and Bob Whitaker, and we're back there, and Kurt comes in and he says, which one of you guys is the Frogs, or something like that. And we introduced ourselves. He said, I'm Jimmy, I'm Dennis. Shake his hand, and then we, you know, took a couple pictures, and my friend Bobby Braveman, he took the 2 pictures, and then
I know Bobby too.
Yeah, and so so he says to Dennis, he says, you know, Sue, he said, you know, thanks for that album, for the album. I've been looking for that for a long time. And he said, and Dennis thought he meant It's Only Right Nashville. He meant the first album, which, you know, I guess hard to find anyway, right? So he loved that album. So and then Dennis was speaking with him, you know, often. You went and talked to him, and you know, he was just telling him that, you know, he just loved the heart-shaped box video, and you know, just thought it was so cool. And Dennis said, Dennis is creative, you may know. So Dennis said, you know, I love that video. I just thought at one point you should have grabbed one of those apples, and it would have been a fetus or whatever. You just took a bite out. I don't know what he said. He said, you should direct our next video. And so I remember, you know, not being too far from Chris Novoselic was in the corner. He was kind of saying like, yeah, when we play Europe, you guys should open for us. And, you know, we were on board with that. So then what's the next thing? So you want this full story?
Sure, absolutely. Whatever you want to share with me, I'm happy to hear it.
Says, so Dennis is talking to him. Besides that, Dennis said, you know, I just love those, those in utero statues with the wings on stage. He said, those are so cool. I said, once again, this is Kurt. He said, you know, after the tour's over, you can have them.
And for a guy whose whole career was wearing bat wings, that's pretty awesome.
Oh yeah, yeah. So at the end of the night, so he was talking, and they exchanged phone numbers, and then they're leaving at the end of the night, and of course, and he just said, I don't know, we said goodbye, and maybe kind of like hope to see him again or whatever it might have been. And Dennis had his number, so and a time in the future, when not when things, but nothing's going on with our career. Dennis said, I should, and he never did. He said, I would give Kurt a call whenever, and that's the meeting.
You guys also had a pretty good working relationship and friendship with Billy Corgan too. You mentioned the Pumpkins before. I mean, Chicago's not that far away from Milwaukee, but he appeared on stage with you guys. You produced the Star Job EP, and at one point, I think Dennis was a touring member of the Smashing Pumpkins for a bit. Tell me about the relationship with him.
How it began when that's another. I don't know. He was supportive of between him and Eddie Vedder, and I guess Kurt behind the scenes. Kurt was between him and Billy Corgan. They were the ones that said they wanted us to play Lollapalooza, so we were a surefire guest on that one. The full story. I mean, it goes to Madison, Wisconsin, to 1991 when they were doing Gish. Right, the Pumpkins, they were recording Gish at Sound Smart Studios with Butch Vig, and then Jimmy Chamberlain's girlfriend at the time said, "Oh, the Frogs are playing. You guys should check them out." They never knew who we were, never heard of us, or whatever. And they said, "Check them out at Balcase Corral." And I said, so they had, they finished the night at the studio, and they came. Jimmy and Billy came down, and we were playing on stage that night. I didn't meet him. We heard about that. When you're talking about Jay Chiller was wearing a Fu Manchu mustache get up at the show, and we did Under Pressure / what's the Can't Touch This medley. But the only time we ever did that show, and so I think Billy remembered that or thought that was interesting, and so the next time, it might have been a year later, we played at the Lounge Acts in Chicago, you're probably familiar with, and and Jimmy and Darcy came to the show. Jimmy and James, Eha and Darcy, and they had and James had I already got a Right Natural biography or something. He was, I don't know if he wanted to sign it or whatever, but he had it with him. And then after the show, I think I don't know, maybe Darcy said, they loved. I don't know if they actually said. Darcy said, you guys should open for us, or we should play with us, or whatever. And I just one of those. Then I think the next times we were backstage at Metro, and this is around the time that Lou Reed had just played in town at the Metro, and my friend Scott LaBerge was talking to Billy and said, did you see Lou Reed the other night? And they both were talking about Lou Reed, and then Dennis were there, and Billy said, whatever he said, but he said, you guys should open for us, whatever. We'll be playing soon, and this was before Siamese Dream. So then we actually, the very first show on the tour of the Siamese Dream, we opened for, and then a few shows after that. And during that time, then I guess we got to know Billy better, and then he said, I'll record you guys, and then he recorded us for free, which was nice, but we still had to pay for the studio time, that kind of thing. And then eventually, because James and Darcy had their label, they opted to they wanted to put out the 6 songs and Star Job, which at the time, and it could have became a little bigger with Bear, or some of the songs that eventually came on were around at the time, but eventually ended up at Hopscotch. That became that, and Billy's been a supporter that way, or then when we did Lollapalooza and he joined us on stage,
it's a good push. Definitely good to have a guy like that in your corner too.
Yeah.
So I've been reading about this and hearing about this for a while. There's been a documentary that's been in the works for a number of years. And I've heard interviews with the director, and the guy's been putting it together. And it's taken almost like a full decade for this to finally see the light of day. Where do things stand with that? Is there any progress with that, or is it still long ways to go?
Well, last I spoke with him, or whenever that I speak to him once in a while, periodically. He put out My Daughter the Broad, Josh Modell, as
Right.
on 4 records, and so he's his idea. Well, he's that is pretty much. Last I spoke with him, and this regarding this might have been a month ago. It might have been like if he's shooting for an hour 30 or hour 40 cut, it might be at a 1:15 right now or something like that, or that's to his liking. And so he's got someone editing right now, and it's going to be doing the sound, whatever you do, the color print, all that kind of stuff to make it all finalized. And he was telling me it'd be the end of this year or early next year.
Wow.
So that's my guess. And as the months go by, it's already August. So once again, not that this is not I've been all along since 2016 or whatever it is. I've been thinking, oh yeah, it's just right around the corner. But I'm patient and just thankful and grateful that he's doing it. Since he's someone who's been interested in doing that.
Yeah. I know that you and your brother were very, very close, and obviously after he passed away, going back and listening to all this old material and reissuing stuff, and even issuing stuff that had not been released. How do you feel about listening to some of that old material? Do you feel any which way, or do you look at it from a different perspective without him, being a part of you with this effort?
Yeah, well, in terms of the releases or all that kind of stuff, he I always take him into account, or his thoughts and his feelings and whatever that might be. You don't know how this works, or maybe you do, how life works, how people, where people disappear to or come back, or if their consciousness is around. And, I always take him into account. I'm just not thinking like, because he did in the artwork, and he did all those things with the, do the artwork. I'm going to do the set design, all that kind of stuff. Here's the set list, and and the decisions like, okay, let's put these songs on the album, or and so I do the same kind of thing where I learned a lot from him over the years. Okay, let's put the hookiest songs are out, or the most emotional songs, or the songs that move people, or the songs that make the whole world sing.
Right.
Yeah. So I mean, it's one of those when when he's around. He's not around now, but at the time, it's not like you take it for granted, or his contribution. But obviously, he had a big contribution. He let it be known to me, and as brothers, there's a lot going on with that, and there's a lot of love, and it's just I'm thinking when I'm doing it, and I'm not like I'm just going to do anything or whatever. I'm even with the songs like "Picking Flowers on the Hillside for My Love," one of the extra tracks on the double album, "My Daughter the Broad." That's a song that, and when we were driving around, and Billy Corgan was in the back seat. And that's one of those where and it just kept going on with the "Picking Flowers." And he said, he was like, "Stop it, stop," because he was laughing hysterically. I mean, to us, we know we're doing our thing, and we can, at the time, we're even laughing when we're creating it, because we're like, because we don't know what we're going to say, somebody
Right.
says like, you start laughing because I didn't expect that, and then you just join in and you harmonize, and I don't know where was I going with that story.
I don't know. It's a perfectly good answer, no matter where it was. Jimmy, this has been great. It's nice to finally get a chance to talk to you after 40 years of seeing the Frogs, and I'm looking forward to getting a brand new copy of My Daughter the Broad. Jimmy, thank you so much. Good to talk to you. Take care now. Bye.
Bye.
The expanded 30th anniversary reissue of My Daughter the Broad by the Frogs is coming out on September 11th. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you can reach me at bax@rock102.com. I'd love to hear what you think. Thanks again to Metro Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram at Chicopee for their support, but most of all, thanks to you for listening to Baxie's Musical Podcast.